The Two Towers, a sleepy summary. As you prepare for rest, let this summary serve as a gentle companion to the world of Middle-earth. This condensed retelling is a soft invitation to explore the full brilliance of J.R.R. Tolkien's original work. While these words offer a calming path to sleep, the true depth of the Two Towers, from the shadows of Orthanc to the heights of Cirith Ungol, awaits in the richness of the pages themselves. Where we left off, the fellowship was broken. That is the exact word for it, broken, not ended, not concluded, but fractured the way that a stone fractures in multiple directions at once, each piece going its own way with its own particular weight and momentum. Frodo and Sam have gone east across the great river Anduin toward Mordor, carrying the ring and each other's company, which is the most important thing either of them is carrying. The rest of the fellowship, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, are somewhere on the western bank of the river, running through the woods toward a sound that has already told them something went wrong. And Merry and Pippin are somewhere in those same woods, and something happened to them, and this is where we begin again. Boromir is dying. He is propped against a tree at the edge of the woods above the river, and he has 3 black-feathered arrows in him, and he is still alive, and Aragorn kneels beside him. Boromir is very large and very pale, and his golden hair is dark with sweat, and the expression on his face is the expression of a man who has understood something very recently and does not have enough time left to fully account for it. He tried to take the ring. He knows what that means. He says so. He says he has failed, that Gondor has failed, and Aragorn, who has every reason to be angry and feels none of it, or if he does, it is so entirely submerged under grief and respect that it cannot be found, tells him no. No man could have a better defense than his. He kept his faith. He fought for his people. The enemy has been defeated, and Gondor is not fallen, and the White City will not fall while Aragorn still lives, and Boromir, hearing this, lets himself believe it just enough, and dies with Aragorn's hands on his shoulders and his king's face above him. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, is not a man who performs grief. He feels it simply and completely and sets it aside because there is no time yet, and there will be time later, but not now. He is taller than most men, broad-shouldered and long-limbed, with dark hair and grey eyes that have the particular depth of someone who has lived many lives in one and still feels the weight of each. He has been called Strider in the north and many other things in many other places, and he moves through the world with the slightly self-effacing competence of someone who has spent decades being underestimated and found it useful. He carries the shards of the sword Andúril, the flame of the West, a blade broken in an ancient battle and not yet reforged, because the reforging is for when the time is right, and the time is not yet right, but it is coming. He knows this. He feels it the way you feel a season changing, a shift in the quality of the air, something turning in the deep structure of the world. He and Legolas and Gimli give Boromir's body to the river in the elvish fashion, setting him in one of the fellowship's boats with his weapons and his shield and the horn that was cloven in 2, and sending him out over the falls of Rhoros, and watching him go over the thundering edge and be taken by the white water, and then being unable to watch any more. Then they turn north, running, because the orcs who shot Boromir took Merry and Pippin, and the tracks go north, and 3 days hard running might still make a difference. Legolas Greenleaf, as he runs, is the most effortless thing in the landscape. He is elvish, which means he is very old in the way that elves are very old, ancient, technically, but not decayed, the way that a tree is ancient without being diminished, time having added to him rather than subtracted. He has long, pale golden hair tied back and large, clear, grey-green eyes, and a face that has the fine-cut, high-boned quality that elvish faces tend to have, as if they were made with slightly more care than the usual, slightly more attention to the proportion of things. He runs over the top of the grass without pressing it down, because his weight, distributed as it is by elvish lightness, is insufficient to disturb the grass, which is the kind of thing that Gimli, who is built very differently, finds simultaneously impressive and slightly annoying. He can see things at distances that should be impossible. He knows the land through his feet and can read the wind for information, and his arrows, when he looses them, go where they are sent. Gimli, son of Glóin, runs beside him with considerably more effort and considerably more noise and a stubbornness that makes the effort irrelevant. Gimli is a dwarf, which means he is compact and broad and low to the ground, built for mines and tunnels and the close, dark, hard work of the deep places of the earth, not for open country pursuit across the plains of Rohan. His red beard is braided, and his axe is at his hip, and his legs are about half the length of Aragorn's, and he is keeping up. He is keeping up through an act of pure dwarven refusal, the refusal to be the thing that slows the chase, the refusal to be less than the task requires. He will not say he is tired, not because he is not tired, but because saying it accomplishes nothing and stopping is not an option. There is a respect developing between him and Legolas that neither of them would describe as a friendship yet, but that is the exact shape of one in the making. They run for 3 days across the great plain of Rohan, which is the land of the horse lords, a country of rolling grass as far as the eye can reach, pale gold and green under a wide and indifferent sky. Rohan is the sort of place where the horizon feels very far away, and the sky feels very large, and the smallness of any individual thing in it is gently, persistently emphasized by the scale of the grass going on and on in every direction. There are hills in the far north and mountains to the east and west, but in the middle of Rohan there is mainly wind and grass, and the wide flat light of a sky that doesn't bother with pretension. The Rohirrim, the people of Rohan, are horse riders, tall and fair-haired, with a culture built around horses and loyalty, and a kind of plain-spoken directness that does not trouble itself with subtlety when plainness will do. They have a king, who we will come to, and a great hall of gold, which we will also come to. On the 3rd day, running, they encounter the Rohirrim, a company of riders, sweeping across the plain with the efficiency of people who have been riding horses since before they could walk, armed with spears and swords, and the particular confidence of people moving through their own land. Their captain is a man named J.R.R, the 3rd Marshal of the Mark, and he is imposing in the specific way that a large, well-armed, outdoor person who is also clearly intelligent is imposing when they are also obviously irritated and in a hurry. J.R.R is tall and broad-shouldered, with long fair hair and light grey eyes, and a jaw that suggests opinions are held with some firmness in that face. He has just, as it happens, ridden through a group of orcs near the edge of the forest of Fangorn and killed every single one of them. And among the debris of that engagement there was no sign of living hobbits, which he says with a slightly apologetic directness. It is bad news. It should be the end of the chase. Aragorn listens to all of it, and then follows a trail in the grass that the Rohirrim did not notice, because tracking is one of the very many things Aragorn is very good at, and the trail leads to the edge of the forest. Fangorn Forest sits at the feet of the misty mountains to the northwest, like something that has been there since before the mountains had their current name. It is old. Not old in the way that houses or roads are old in the way that makes the word old seem like an understatement invented by people who have never encountered the real thing. The trees of Fangorn are enormous and dark and very close together, and the light inside the forest is green and dim and has the quality of light that has been filtered through leaves so many times that it has almost forgotten it was ever sunlight. The roots of the trees are visible above the ground, massive and tangled, and the bark of the oldest trees has a texture like faces, the suggestion of features, the impression, just at the edge of credibility, of awareness. The air in Fangorn is very still and smells of earth and something very old and green, and the silence has layers to it, different qualities of quiet stacked on top of each other like geological strata. Things live in Fangorn that are not visible but are very definitely present, and this is the sort of forest that makes even experienced outdoorspeople walk a little more carefully and talk a little more softly. Inside Fangorn, something very large and very slow is moving. Merry and Pippin, having escaped the orc camp in the chaos of the Rohirrim's attack, ran into the forest, and what they found there is Treebeard. Treebeard is an ent. An ent, for those unfamiliar, is a shepherd of trees, or more precisely, is the kind of being that trees would be if trees could walk and think and speak, which in Fangorn they essentially can through the medium of the ents. Treebeard is very, very tall. He is perhaps 14 feet of ancient, slow, bark-covered patience, with long limbs that move the way branches move in a light wind, with deep-set eyes the color of old leaves lit by autumn sun, brown-green and very attentive, and a voice that begins somewhere below the frequency of ordinary speech and resonates in your chest when he talks. He moves slowly, not because he is weak or old in the deteriorating sense, but because hurrying is something that ents are philosophically disinclined to do. Haste, in Treebeard's estimation, is what happens when you haven't thought about things properly, and things should be thought about properly, with all available time devoted to the consideration before any action is taken. He has been having some thoughts for about a century that he has not yet reached any conclusions on, and this is not, to Treebeard, unusual. He picks up Merry and Pippin in enormous gentle hands and looks at them for a very long time. He has not seen hobbits before. He is thinking about what they are, which takes a while, because Treebeard's thinking is thorough. He settles them in the crook of his enormous arms and carries them through the forest to his home, which is a hall that is half cave and half open space, with a natural spring running through it and bowls carved from living wood and the smell of deep earth and old green things. And he gives them a drink of water from the spring that is not exactly water, but is something like water distilled to its essential nature. and it is warm and golden and tastes like the first day of spring. And Merry and Pippin, who have been through a very great deal in the last several days, feel enormously better immediately. Treebeard talks to them. He talks in the way that Ents talk, which is to say at length, and with great deliberation and frequent pauses. And during the pauses you should not assume he has finished, because he has very likely not finished, and the pause is part of the sentence in some fundamental way that you need to adjust to. He tells them about the Ents, about Fangorn, about how old everything is, and how much has been lost, and how long they have watched the world change. And underneath all of this, like a current under slow water, is something that is not quite anger, but is what anger would look like if you gave it several thousand years to mature. The trees are being cut. The forest is being taken. Someone is burning the wood of Fangorn to feed the fires of Isengard, and Treebeard has been very, very slowly arriving at the conclusion that something should be done about this. Meanwhile, back on the edge of the forest, Aragorn finds a trail that should not be there, a trail leading not out of the forest but into it, from the direction of the battle, made by very large feet and moving with purposeful speed, which is the opposite of what the known contents of Fangorn produce in terms of movement. He follows it cautiously into the green dimness of the trees, and at the center of a shaft of light between the ancient trunks, there is an old man in a white robe. The old man is very still and very bright, and seems to be waiting for them, has perhaps been waiting for some time. His robes are white, not the cream or off-white of old fabric, but genuinely, startlingly, piercingly white, the white of new snow or of light itself. His hair and beard are white. His staff is white. He is very tall, and his eyes, when they open fully, are the eyes of someone who has seen a very great deal and been through something profound on the other side of it, the eyes of someone returned. Gimli raises his axe. Legolas reaches for an arrow. Aragorn is absolutely still, because they thought it was Saruman at first, the old man in white who knows their names and their errand and the exact quality of their grief. But it is not Saruman, it is Gandalf, Gandalf the White. Gandalf fell in Moria with the Balrog, and Gandalf fell and fell through the deep places of the mountain, and the Balrog fell with him, and the battle continued through the dark, through underground lakes and caverns and passages of ancient stone, until at last they came out at the highest peak of the mountain and fought there above the clouds, two great spirits in shapes of fire and shadow and age. And Gandalf won, and the Balrog was destroyed, and Gandalf fell, and he lay on the peak for a long time. And he was sent back because there is still work to do, because the task is not finished, because someone has to do what Gandalf does, and there is no one else to do it. He is Gandalf the White now, which is not just a change of wardrobe. It means that the thing that made Saruman what he was is now Gandalf's, the head of the Order, the new White, and it sits on him differently than it sat on Saruman, more lightly, or perhaps simply with more honesty about what it is. He tells them what they need to know and what they have time to hear, and then they go to Rohan and to the king. Rohan's capital, though capital is perhaps too formal a word for it, is Edoras, which sits on a hill in a wide valley with the white mountains behind it, a cluster of golden rooftops visible from a great distance across the plain, surrounded by a wall and a ditch. and at its center, at the highest point of the hill, the great hall of Meduseld, the Golden Hall. Meduseld is very large and very old, and very beautiful in the specific way of a building that was made with real craftsmanship in a simpler time, and has been kept with real pride ever since. Its walls hung with tapestries, its roof thatched in gold that catches the sunlight and throws it back, its doors carved with running horses, its threshold stone-flagged and worn by centuries of feet. The Rohirrim have a word for this kind of place, a word that means roughly the feeling of something old and beloved and worth dying for, and Meduseld gives that feeling immediately and completely. The king of Rohan is Theoden, son of Thengel, and when Aragorn and Gandalf and Legolas and Gimli come to him in his hall, what they find is a man who has been aged by something other than time. Theoden is old, he should be old, he has been king for a long time, but the age on him is wrong, the age of a man who has been consumed by something, whittled down, made dim. He sits in his great chair, and he is grey and shrunken, and his eyes are far away, and the hall around him is dim, because the darkness in the king makes the hall dim, the way that a room takes on the quality of the mood of the person in it. He is attended by a man named Grima, who is called Wormtongue, and who is thin and pale and dark-haired, and has pale eyes that move across faces the way that water finds cracks in stone, always looking for the weakness, always speaking the soft word that confirms the worry, that deepens the despair, that keeps the king right where he wants him. Grima is Saruman's agent in the court of Rohan, has been for years, a slow poison poured into the king's ear by a voice that knows exactly what each particular ear needs to hear. Gandalf removes Grima's influence from Theoden. It is not a dramatic exorcism. It is, in fact, more like watching someone simply refuse to maintain a spell that was always more about the recipient's willingness to believe it than about any external force. Gandalf speaks plainly, cuts through the soft, careful layers of Grima's whispered counsel, and Theoden, king and soldier and the son of kings, responds to plainness the way that honest things respond to being called by their honest names. He straightens. The grey falls away. He calls for his armor and his horse and his sword, and he goes out into the sunlight of his own hall's steps, and he looks out over Edoras and the plains of Rohan, and whatever was done to him is undone, and he is old, still, genuinely old now, but awake and himself, and angry in the specific way of a man who has understood that he has been used. He banishes Grima, who crawls away through the mud below the steps and goes north toward Isengard and Saruman, which is what Gandalf expects and does not try to prevent, because Grima going back to Saruman will carry certain information, and the information is part of a plan. The plan involves the defense of Rohan, which is urgently needed. Saruman's forces are marching from Isengard, an army of orcs and men and things bred in the dark below Orthanc, and they are marching toward the people of Rohan, who must be gathered, must be moved, must be sheltered somewhere that can be defended. Theoden decides to take his people to Helm's Deep. Helm's Deep is a fortress and a refuge, a great stronghold built into the entrance of a gorge in the White Mountains, its walls thick stone, its gates iron, its position designed by someone who understood that a thing properly defended from the right ground is worth 10 times its value in open battle. Behind the main wall is the Hornburg, the great keep, and behind the keep is the deep itself, the gorge running back into the mountain, and behind the gorge is a cavern, the glittering caves of Aglarond, which are one of the most beautiful places in the world that almost nobody ever goes to voluntarily, because you generally only end up in them if you are fleeing something. The walls of the caves are seamed with crystals that catch the light of a single torch and throw it back in colors that have no satisfactory names. Shifting and Deep and Gimli, who sees them in the midst of battle and at the worst possible time for appreciating architecture, is so moved that he goes a little quiet, which for Gimli is an unusual state. The people of Rohan move. Thousands of them, old men, women, children, everyone who cannot fight, walking south through the rain and the wind toward the deep. A great slow movement of a people carrying their necessary things and leaving the rest. And the sky over Rohan is dark, and the rain is cold, and the grass is flattened by the feet of too many people moving in the same direction. And it has the feeling of something that cannot be unmade, a change in the world that you cannot walk back from. There is an ambush in the night, warg riders attacking the column, great wolf-like creatures carrying orc riders, and there is a fight in the dark and the rain, and Aragorn goes over a cliff during it, which is the kind of thing that happens to him with unsettling regularity, and he is not found after the battle, and Legolas and Gimli carry the weight of not knowing whether he is alive for one very long day. He is alive. He arrives at Helm's Deep on a horse, the white horse Hasuful, lent by Ioma, wet and bruised and carrying news that he got from something very old and very strange on the plains in the night, a vision or a dream or a conversation, that the morning is coming and it matters, and this is not the end. The Rohirrim shut themselves into Helm's Deep, and the army of Saruman arrives. It is very large. It is larger than anyone had expected or hoped. 10,000. They estimate 10,000 orcs and wild men and things bred for war in the pits under Isengard, filling the valley in front of the deeping wall, their torches going back and back until the valley looks like the surface of a dark sea on fire. Theoden looks at it from the walls and says something that is not despair, but is very close to despair's border, the look of a man counting, and the numbers not coming out right. The Battle of Helm's Deep is long and exhausting and very dark and punctuated by rain, which continues through the entire battle with the persistence of weather that has made up its mind. The Rohirrim defend the Deeping Wall and the Hornburg with everything they have, which is considerable. These are trained, brave, experienced fighters who know these walls and know what is at stake. But the army outside is immense, and eventually the wall is breached by some device of Saruman's, an explosive force unlike anything anyone present has encountered before, and the wall comes down in a column of fire and smoke and raining stone, and the defense contracts, pulling back to the Hornburg and then to the deep itself, and it seems, for a long, cold, wet, dark hour, that the morning is not coming, that the end is this, that the math has simply gone wrong. And then the sun comes, and with the sun, on the ridge above the valley, Gandalf. Gandalf on a white horse, Shadowfax, the Lord of Horses, silver-grey and vast and moving like water over the ground, and behind him Iomir, and behind Iomir a company of Rohirrim that had been sent away earlier, returned now, come over the hill in the first light, and charging down the slope into the flank of the Orc army. And the Orcs break, fleeing back toward the forest of Huorns that has appeared, quietly and inexplicably, in the valley behind them in the night. And the forest takes them, and they are not seen again. Theoden rides out of the gate of the Hornburg in the dawn, and he rides through the battle, and for the first time in a long time he looks like a king. But Isengard must be dealt with. They ride north, the fellowship of this moment, Theoden, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Gandalf, through a country that smells of aftermath, of wet earth and trampled grass and smoke from somewhere distant, and they come to Isengard and find it already dealt with. Isengard, before it was dealt with, was a great circular valley surrounded by a wall of stone and iron, and at its center the Tower of Orthanc, an impossibly tall, impossibly dark spire of ancient rock, perfectly smooth, its sides shearing straight up 500 feet with no visible seam or entry point below a single high window. A tower that predates almost everything, and that was not made by the people who now occupy it, but was adopted by them. Which is the kind of architectural choice that says something about a person. Saruman looked out of the high window of Orthanc onto a valley that had been, over the years of his tenancy, converted from green and living into a vast industrial operation. Forges and furnaces and breeding pits and tunnels, trees stripped from the valley and fed to the fires, the whole circular space turned into a machine for making soldiers and weapons and the tools of domination, beautiful in its way, the terrible beauty of a thing designed with complete commitment to a single purpose. All of the land that should be growing things now making only one thing: war. The Ents came to Isengard. Treebeard, after the long and thorough consideration that is his nature's commitment, reached a conclusion. The conclusion was that the time for patience had passed, that watching Saruman use the trees of Fangorn to feed his machines was something that had gone on long enough, and that the Ents would march. This was a significant conclusion. The last time the Ents marched in earnest was so long ago that most people alive cannot tell you when it was. An Ent march is not a fast thing, and it is not a quiet thing, and it is not a polite thing. It is a very large, very old, very determined force of nature directed at a very specific target, and the specific target in this case has walls made of stone and iron, which are not equal to the occasion. The Ents broke Isengard. They tore down the walls, they destroyed the forges, they shattered the channels and the dams and let the river Isen in, and the river flooded the valley and put out the fires and filled the pits. And by the time Gandalf and the Rohirrim arrive, Isengard is a ruin, a flooded valley of broken stone, with only Orthanc still standing in the middle of the water, untouched, unbreakable, its smooth sides indifferent to everything that happened around it. And in the middle of this ruin, sitting on a piece of tumbled masonry at the gate, are Merry and Pippin, eating. They have found Saruman's stores of food and tobacco, which are very good, because Saruman, whatever else he became, maintained standards about his larder, and they have made themselves comfortable on the ruins of his industrial empire, and they are extremely pleased with themselves, and Gimli, who finds this harder to process than most of the supernatural things that have happened, stands in the ruined gate and stares at them for a long moment in something that is mostly affection doing an impression of exasperation. Gandalf goes to the base of Orthanc and has a conversation with Saruman at the high window, and the conversation is one of those conversations in which the person in the high window is trying, out of habit or arrogance or the inability to stop being what he has always been, to use his voice to exert his will. And the person at the base of the tower is simply not participating in that particular dynamic. Saruman's voice is extraordinary. It was always the greatest of his gifts, the voice that could reframe anything, that could make you hear what he wanted you to hear rather than what was said. But it finds no purchase with Gandalf, and Theoden, who begins by intending to listen, hears Saruman's voice begin its work on him and feels it, and is revolted by the feel of it, and turns away. And Gandalf breaks Saruman's staff, and the window closes, and Saruman withdraws. A round, rolling object falls from the window and nearly hits Pippin's foot. It is a Palantir, one of the great seeing stones, ancient objects of extraordinary power, smooth orbs of glass or crystal that are black in ordinary light, and that can see vast distances when used, and that Sauron has been using to communicate with and corrupt Saruman through. Gandalf takes it. But Pippin, that night while Gandalf sleeps, and not entirely as a result of entirely his own desires, takes it back and looks into it, and the eye finds him, and he sees things that are not for him, and is seen by something that he was absolutely not ready to meet. And Gandalf wakes, and there is a brief, alarming scene of Pippin writhing and rigid, and the stone blazing hot in his hands, and it is over, and Pippin is not permanently damaged. But Gandalf is shaken in the way that he rarely allows himself to be, and the stone must be kept safe. Gandalf takes Pippin and rides south on Shadowfax at a speed that leaves the rest behind, because what Pippin saw in the Palantir was seen by Sauron, and what Sauron will do with what he saw depends on what he concluded, and Gandalf needs to be in the white city of Minas Tirith before any of that matters. Merry remains with the Rohirrim, with Theoden and Aragorn and Eomer, as they prepare for what is coming next, because something is always coming next, and at the moment it is coming from Mordor. But the eye is not only looking at Minas Tirith. The eye is looking always for the ring. And the ring is on the other side of the story entirely, moving east, moving slowly, moving through country that gets worse the further east it goes, carried by two very tired and very determined hobbits who are being led by a creature that neither of them fully trusts. Gollum. His name was Sméagol, once, very long ago, before the ring, before the cave, before the centuries of solitude that hollowed him out and refilled him with something else. He was a creature something like a hobbit, or something that would have become a hobbit if the world had gone differently for him. Small and round-faced, originally, with large round eyes that were probably quite pleasant before the long dark of Mirkwood and the mountains worked their slow transformation. Now he is thin to the point of seeming constructed of joints and skin, his large pale eyes luminous in the dark, his long fingers splayed on rocks, his hair gone, his spine slightly curved from decades of moving on all fours through low tunnels. He speaks in a hissing, whispering voice that often speaks of itself in the plural, we, us, precious, which is the voice of a self divided so long ago that the division has become the permanent state, two voices in one throat, one of which still reaches, occasionally and painfully, toward something that used to be a person. Frodo captured him, or allowed him to be captured, came upon him following them in the darkness near the borders of Mordor, and something, perhaps the ring itself, perhaps something genuine and independent in Frodo, reached a decision not to kill him, because Gandalf once said something about pity, about the pity of Bilbo staying his hand, and Frodo has been thinking about this since Rivendell. He made Gollum swear on the ring to lead them, and Gollum swore, and now Gollum leads, and this arrangement is very uneasy for everyone involved. Sam Gamgee does not trust Gollum. Sam's relationship with trust is grounded and practical, and does not extend to something that tried to throttle them in their sleep, regardless of oaths taken on magic rings. He watches Gollum with a flat, patient, unchanging wariness, the wariness of a gardener who has identified a pest and is waiting to see what it does before deciding what to do about it. Sam is not cruel to Gollum. He is simply honest, and in Gollum's experience, honesty and cruelty have become largely indistinguishable because most honest things said about him are not kind. Sam calls him Slinker and Stinker privately for the two voices, the two behaviors, the two almost selves that shift and struggle in the one small body. Frodo watches Gollum with something more complicated because Frodo is carrying the ring, and the ring, while it has not yet done to Frodo what it did to Gollum in centuries of possession, has begun to establish communication with him, a weight that is not just physical, a presence at the edge of awareness. He looks at Gollum and sees what he might become. He doesn't articulate this, even to himself, but it is there in the way he treats Gollum with a gentleness that Sam finds baffling and that Gollum himself sometimes responds to with something that is not gratitude exactly, but is the ghost of a shape that gratitude used to inhabit. They travel through a country that becomes increasingly terrible. The Dead Marshes are a wide and flat expanse of wetland that stretches across the approach to Mordor, brown and grey, the grass and reeds between the pools going the colour of old bone, the water reflecting a sky that is grey even when the sky is not particularly grey. The smell is bad, sulphurous, organic, the smell of decomposition that has been going on for a very long time. The marshes are full of lights, small and cold and flickering, and if you look at the lights, which you should not do, and Gollum says so with unusual firmness, you see faces in the water below them. The faces are the dead, drowned or sunk during the great battles of the Second Age, men and elves and orcs together under the black water, perfectly preserved by whatever is in the water and by whatever else is in the marshes, staring up at the surface with the specific expression of people who have been looking up at the surface for 3,000 years and have not yet stopped hoping that something will change. They are not real. You cannot touch them. But if you reach for one, the story implies you would go in the water, and then perhaps you too would have a candle lit for your face. Frodo falls in during the crossing. Gollum pulls him out, faster than expected, with the hands of someone who knows the marshes very well and who, whatever else he is, has made a promise and is keeping it in this particular moment. They get through the marshes. They sit below the Morannon, the Black Gate of Mordor, which is everything you would imagine a gate built by evil into the side of a mountain range to be. Two great iron-bound towers flanking an enormous gate of black iron, set in a wall of black stone, the wall running from mountain to mountain on either side, with the thoroughness of something designed to keep everything out and everything in simultaneously. The gate is guarded constantly, thoroughly, by things that come and go in numbers that suggest a very organized and very thorough army behind the gate. There are two fortresses on the hills flanking the approach, and there are watchers in both of them. Frodo stands and looks at the black gate and understands that walking through it is impossible. Gollum knows another way. He says this with the wheedling, slightly sycophantic eagerness that characterizes his helpfulness when he is being helpful, which is always slightly unnerving because you cannot be entirely sure whether the helpfulness is genuine or strategic or a combination of both that even he cannot untangle. He knows a secret way into Mordor, a high pass in the mountains to the south, on the border between Gondor and Mordor, and he knows the way in. Sam objects. Sam objects with the plain, specific energy of someone who has identified the problem clearly and is stating it plainly and does not intend to be talked out of his objection without a very good reason. The objection is that they should not trust Gollum. The reason they proceed anyway is that there is no other way. They turn south, skirting the mountain range, moving through the hills above a dead land on one side and a country that was once the north of Ithilien on the other. Ithilien is an interesting place to come from when you are traveling to Mordor, because Ithilien is beautiful. It was once a province of Gondor, the Garden of Gondor as people used to call it, and even now, abandoned and somewhat wild, it retains a bone-deep beauty that is the kind of beauty that happens when a naturally lovely piece of land is left alone for a century or two. The gardens have gone to wilderness, but the wilderness remembers what the gardens knew, and there are cascades of water over mossy stone, and the trees are very old and very full. And in spring, the flowers come back every year regardless of who is managing the geopolitical situation, which is something to know about flowers. In this beautiful borderland, Frodo and Sam and Gollum are captured. Or rather, found, which becomes captured, by rangers of Ithilien, soldiers of Gondor operating in the borderlands in small, skilled, self-sufficient bands, moving quietly through the wilderness, fighting a rearguard war against the increasing pressure of Mordor on a land that they have not yet given up. Their captain is Faramir, son of Denethor, brother of Boromir, and he is one of the most interesting people Frodo will meet on this journey. Faramir is tall and dark-haired, with grey eyes that are, in a certain light, very similar to his brother's, but the expression in them is entirely different. Where Boromir's eyes were direct and hot with conviction, Faramir's are quiet and very thoughtful, the eyes of a scholar or a diplomat in the body of a soldier, someone who reads as much as he fights and thinks that the thinking and the fighting should inform each other. He looks at Frodo and Sam with the precise, careful assessment of an intelligent man cataloging what he is seeing, and what he is seeing does not entirely match his expectations. He asks questions, good questions. He is searching for something in the answers, and he finds it slowly in the shape of information about his brother. Boromir is dead. Faramir does not know this yet, but there is a moment during the questioning where the structure of what Frodo tells him arranges itself into the answer that Faramir has been dreading, and the thing that passes over his face is very brief and very deep, and he closes it quickly with the discipline of someone accustomed to feeling difficult things without showing them. He grieves. He contains the grief and goes on. He asks about the ring. He has understood, from the conversation and from his own considerable intelligence, that there is something significant being carried, and he asks what it is. Frodo tells him something that is true and incomplete, which is the most any reasonable person can expect in the circumstances. And Faramir here does something that distinguishes him from his brother and reveals everything important about who he is. He says he would not pick up the ring if he found it lying on the road, would not pick up the ring to use it in the defense of Gondor, would not want the power that such a thing would give him, because he has thought about what kind of power that is and what it does to the one who wields it, and he wants no part of it. He says it without drama and without being asked, and it is clearly true. The way that things said simply and without decoration are often clearly true. He leads them to a hideout behind a waterfall, a curtain of falling water concealing a wide, dry, deeply pleasant cave, which is a phenomenon that Middle-earth provides with frequency, as if the landscape is cooperating with the need for secluded sanctuaries, and here they rest and eat, and the rangers eat too, and there is venison and whatever is stored in the caves, and it is good, and the sound of the waterfall is the sound of large quantities of water falling, which is one of the most consistently soothing sounds the world provides. But the cave overlooks a pool, and at the pool one evening there is Gollum fishing. Gollum fishing is a very specific and very ancient-looking activity, crouching at the edge of the water in the moonlight, absolutely still, one hand trailing in the pool, and then a motion so fast it barely registers, and a fish. The rangers want to kill him. Frodo asks them not to. He asks on the basis of a promise made and a usefulness that cannot be replaced, and because there is something in him that is not yet done with the idea that pity might have a purpose, even now, even here. Faramir grants it reluctantly. Then Faramir lets them go. He gives them food and a staff and directions, and he says what he needs to say about the road ahead and what is waiting in it. And one of the things he says is a warning about the creature Gollum, a specific and urgent warning, and Frodo listens and promises. And Faramir sends them away into the dark with the specific combination of relief and worry that characterizes the feeling of having done the right thing when the right thing is uncertain. The road south takes them toward a place that Gollum has not named directly, but has been naming around in the way that you name around a thing that frightens you. The pass through the mountains is called Cirith Ungol, and it goes up steeply from the valley below, and the valley below has a name that is almost a sound in itself, Minas Morgul, the Tower of Dark Sorcery, which was once the tower of Gondor's garrison on the eastern pass, and is now the stronghold of the Lord of the Nazgul, the greatest of the Ringwraiths. And it sits at the head of the valley, and it is deeply wrong in the specific way that something that was once a tower of light and is now a tower of shadow is deeply wrong. The way that a corruption is always worse when you can see what the thing was before. They hide in a ditch above the road and watch an army come out of Minas Morgul. It comes out of the gate in silence, which is worse than if it were loud, and at its head is a great figure on a horse that is not like other horses, and the figure has no face, no light anywhere about it, nothing under the hood except the suggestion of something ancient and destroyed and furious. And it is the Lord of the Nazgul, the Witch King, leading an army of Mordor westward toward Gondor, toward the war that is beginning. And it is very large, and it is very terrible, and it passes below them and is gone. Frodo almost puts on the ring. The pull is very strong here in this valley, so close to the eye, he does not. They wait, and the army passes, and then they climb. The pass of Cirith Ungol is a tunnel through the heart of the mountain, and the tunnel is very dark and very large, and something lives in it. Something that Gollum has been building toward and steering toward with the slow, incremental patience of a creature that has been patient for a very long time. Shelob's lair, the tunnel is called because Shelob lives in it, and Shelob is a spider in the way that a mountain is a hill. The category is technically correct and completely inadequate. She is ancient beyond reckoning, predating almost everything, one of the offspring of Ungoliant, the great spider of the darkest stories of the elder days, and she is enormous, enormous in the way that reduces the human ability to process scale, and her eyes are many and pale and cold, and entirely empty of anything that recognizes you as a person rather than a thing that can be eaten. And her webs fill the tunnel completely, and her stench fills the tunnel completely, and she is in the tunnel, and they are also in the tunnel, and this is the situation. Frodo has the phial of Galadriel, the light of Arendil's star, given to him in Lothlorien, and in Shelob's tunnel he holds it up and it blazes, light pouring out in that darkness like something that has never encountered darkness before and is affronted by it, and Shelob recoils. The elvish blade sting glows blue in the blackness, which is information about what Shelob is or contains, and Frodo holds the light and the sword and he goes forward, and they get through, and they come out the other side into open air, and Sam, in the relief of being out, falls behind, and Frodo goes forward alone, and Gollum attacks Sam because this is what Gollum was building toward, this moment, the separation. And while Sam is held down, Shelob comes out of her tunnel behind Frodo. Sam fights Gollum off with a ferocity that surprises both of them. Gollum is very fast and very wiry, and has long fingers that go for the eyes and the throat, and Sam is a hobbit who gardens for a living and whose formal fighting training is roughly zero, and he wins, not by being better than Gollum at fighting, but by being completely unwilling to lose, which is a different thing, and when Gollum runs, he chases Shelob. Shelob has strung Frodo and wrapped him in web and is dragging him into her den, and Sam comes out of the dark with Sting and the phial of Galadriel and the rage of someone who loves someone and is watching them be hurt. And he fights a very large spider, which he does not win gracefully but wins definitively, driving Sting into her while she drives her weight down onto the blade herself, and Shelob recoils and retreats and is gone. Frodo is on the ground, and he is still, and he is cold, and he is wrapped in web, and Sam, cutting through the web and turning him over and calling his name, cannot get an answer, and concludes with the terrible certainty of the immediate moment that Frodo is dead. What Sam does next is one of the most quietly extraordinary things in the story. He takes the ring from Frodo's neck. He puts it on. He thinks about what has to be done. He understands in this moment that if Frodo is dead, the quest is his, and he turns toward Mordor with the ring around his neck and starts walking. He does not stop to grieve. He does not stop to despair. He puts the grief and the despair into a compartment that he will open later, and he starts moving, because the ring must not be captured, because Frodo would want the quest to continue, and because Sam knows what must be done and does it, which is who Sam is. But then there are orcs coming out of the tunnel, and they pick up Frodo's body, and they say things that Sam hears and that change everything, because what they say tells him that Frodo is not dead. Shelob's sting paralyses. It does not kill. She keeps her food alive and fresh. Frodo is alive, and the orcs have him, and they are taking him into the tower of Cirith Ungol, which stands on the western slope of the pass above the valley, and the gate closes. Sam stands outside the gate. He has the ring. He has Sting, he has the file, he has the pack on his back. He is alone, the gate is shut, and inside, somewhere, Frodo is alive and captured, and Sam is going to go get him. The gates of Cirith Ungol are shut. This is going to be a problem. But Sam has been solving problems with insufficient resources since he left the Shire, and the gate is not going to change the fact that Frodo is on the other side of it. Somewhere in Rohan, an army is assembling. Somewhere in Gondor, the beacons are being lit, great fires on the peaks of the White Mountains, the signal chain of a kingdom calling for help, each beacon kindled when the next one is visible, running east to west across the mountains, Amundin to Eilenarch, to Nardal to Irelas, to Minriman, to Calenhad, to Halifirion, fire to fire, the long chain of light, and Merry sees it from the plains of Rohan, and something in him responds to it that is older than anything he knows about himself. The response of someone who understands, in the body before the mind arrives, that this is the moment where everything comes together. Somewhere below Orthanc, Grima Wormtongue, in a moment of spite or accuracy or both, throws something from the window of Saruman's tower, and the something is a Parlantir, and everything that follows follows. The War of the Ring is beginning in earnest. Pippin riding through the night behind Gandalf on the great horse Shadowfax, Shadowfax who runs like weather, like the specific wind that sweeps across flat country at speed, whose hooves barely seem to press the ground, who needs no road but makes his own path, who responds to Gandalf's thought before the thought is spoken. Pippin, clinging on and watching the stars wheel above him, is going south. South to Minas Tirith, south to the White City, south to the last great stronghold of Gondor, the city that stands between the world and the shadow, built on 7 levels into the side of Mount Mindol Luin, its towers white and its walls white and its flags flying, and above it all at the summit, the citadel and the white tower of Exelion, and in the white tower, the steward of Gondor, Denethor, who is Boromir's father and Faramir's father, and who is old and proud, and has been using a Parlantir to look at things he should perhaps not have looked at, and who has his own ideas about how this ends, and none of them are quite right. But that is the next chapter, the next book, the long last turn of the story where all the threads come together and the world decides what it will be. Right now, in this moment, Sam Gamgee is standing outside a gate in the dark with a ring around his neck and sting in his hand, and the gate will open because Sam will make it open. And on the other side, Frodo is waiting to be found, and Sam is the one who will find him. And somewhere in the dead marshes, the faces of the long dead glow cold under the water and do not know that the world above them is changing. And somewhere in Fangorn, the trees move in a way that is not the wind. And somewhere on the plains of Rohan, the great herd of horses runs free in the starlight, and there is no sound but hooves and the long grass bending, and the world is enormous and very dark and full of things that are still, against considerable odds, trying to keep the lights on. Sleep now. The morning is coming. It is always coming.